Welcome to the deep dive. Okay, so today we're really digging into influence itself.
Right, not just, public speaking techniques or charisma.
Exactly. More fundamental. How people actually gain the authority, the power to shift things. Opinions, economies, entire societies.
We've got a huge range of sources lined up for this one. I mean, really spanning the ages, haven't we?
Yeah, it's quite the mix. We're talking ancient Greece.
Aristotle, Cicero, the foundational guys.
All the way through to, well, figures focused on personal success, people like Conwell, Nightingale.
Uh-huh.
And then these absolute giants of social change. Sojourner Truth, Malcolm X, Mandela.
It's fascinating putting them all in the same conversation, really, thinking about what connects them.
Which brings us right to the core question, doesn't it? What's the common thread? I mean, how does someone like Russell Conwell, who's literally telling you it's your duty to get rich right where you are,
Quite a statement.
how does that connect to someone like Elizabeth Cady Stanton, who's risking, well, everything, to demand massive systemic reform and justice?
Yeah. What's that underlying wiring, that common element of, real, lasting influence?
That's exactly what we're hunting for. And I think the answer, when you look across all these incredibly varied figures, it seems clear. The wiring doesn't start out there with the audience or the microphone.
Wow.
It starts inside, with self-mastery, with what Covey calls the proactive mindset.
Okay, let's unpack that, this internal foundation. So the idea is influence has to be built within yourself first before you can project it effectively.
Precisely. And Stephen Covey really nails this with the concept of proactivity.
Yeah.
It's foundational. It's the ability to choose your response based on your values, not just react automatically to whatever happens to you.
So not being just pushed around by circumstances or what other people do.
Exactly. He calls this the private victory. It's all about character growth, about building that internal strength. Proactive people, he says, kind of carry their own weather.
Carry their own weather. I like that. Yeah. Whereas reactive people, they're totally dependent on the environment. Sunshine makes them happy. Rain makes them gloomy. Proactivity means recognizing that gap, that space between stimulus and response. And in that space, that's where our power lies, our power to choose.
And that choice, that self-mastery, leads to real independence, freedom from just being a product of your conditions.
Right. And that independence is what empowers you to act effectively. It's not about being stubborn or isolated, but about having that solid inner core.
And the power of making that choice often becomes clearest under the most extreme circumstances, right? Covey uses Helen Keller as an example.
Yes, a powerful one. Her triumph against, just unbelievable odds. It shows that our spirit, our independent will, can actually be stronger than almost any external limitation.
She wasn't defined by blindness or deafness, but by how she chose to respond.
Absolutely. And if we don't exercise that choice, Covey warns, we slip into victim mode, using victim language, blaming circumstances.
So things like happiness or worry or frustration, they aren't just automatic results of events.
Often not. They're frequently a function of how we perceive things, how we choose to interpret them. Ryan Holiday, drawing on those Stoic ideas, makes this point too. The world gives you this scenario.
But you write the script for your reaction.
You got it. You decide the interpretation. You choose whether you give in to despair or fear or frustration. You have sovereignty over your own judgment.
Okay, so step one for influence. Master the internal frame. Control your interpretation. And Tony Robbins talks about this too, right? Reframing misfortunes.
Yeah, Robbins emphasizes finding the hidden advantage or the lesson in setbacks. Reframing it changes your emotional state immediately. It opens up new paths for action, for finding opportunity where you thought there was only failure.
And this idea, this alignment of internal discipline with seeing external opportunity, that just screams Russell H. Conwell, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It leads us straight to maybe the most famous lecture ever on finding opportunity close to home, Acres of Diamonds.
Delivered thousands of times, apparently.
Over 6,000 times. And his core message was simple but profound. Opportunity, wealth, influence. It's right where you are, right now. You don't need to go searching far and wide.
Let's hear that central parable again, the story of Ali Hafed.
Sure.
It feels so relevant today, for people always looking for the next big thing somewhere else.
It really is a cautionary tale. So Ali Hafed, this farmer in ancient Persia, living contentedly near the Indus River, a priest visits, tells him about the incredible wealth found in diamond mines.
Oh.
Exactly. Ali Hafed becomes obsessed. He sells his beautiful, productive farm, leaves his family, and wanders the world searching for these mythical mines. He finds nothing, burns through his money, becomes destitute. and ends up, tragically, taking his own life in a foreign land utterly broken.
Oh, wow. That's bleak.
It is. But here's the kicker. Years later, the man who bought Ali Hafez's farm is watering his camel in the stream running through the garden.
Yeah.
And he sees a flash of light in the water.
Yeah.
Picks up a stone. It's huge time. And turns out that entire farm, the very land Ali Hafez abandoned,
Was sitting on acres of diamonds.
literally acres of diamonds,
Right.
right under his feet the whole time. He already had the immense wealth he spent his life searching for elsewhere.
It's such a perfect illustration of, like, overlooking the obvious, the immediate resources. Conwell had an American version, too, didn't he? Something about a professor.
He did, yeah. A professor of mineralogy in Massachusetts. Highly educated, knew everything about mining, but felt undervalued, refused to work for, I think it was $45 a week.
Okay.
So he sells his family homestead, convinced real wealth is out west, somewhere else. The guy who buys the farm is just doing ordinary farm work, digging potatoes.
Uh-huh.
And he notices this heavy, dark stone embedded in the wall by the gate. Turns out, it's a massive block of native silver, 8 inches square.
No way.
Yes. And the professor, the expert, had apparently sat right on that block while signing the papers to sell the place.
Wow. So the first step is just paying attention, seeing what's actually there.
That's a huge part of it. But Conwell took it even further. He made this, well, pretty radical claim for a Baptist minister at the time.
What was that?
He argued it wasn't just okay to seek wealth, it was actually a moral duty to get rich, honestly. He said making money through honest means was equivalent to preaching the gospel.
Whoa. How did he justify that? That sounds potentially controversial.
It was. But his logic was that an honest fortune implied you'd provided real value services, products that the community needed. If you could create wealth honestly and chose not to, you were essentially robbing the community of the benefits your skills could provide.
Okay, I see the argument. It reframes wealth creation as a form of service, a contribution, as long as it's honest.
Right. It wasn't about greed or just piling up what he called copper cents, superficial, maybe unearned money. It was about applying common sense.
Common sense, not copper sense. I like that. And he had this amazing takedown of people who had wealth but no, like, competence or discipline, right?
Oh, yeah, the millionaire's son at Niagara Falls. It's almost theatrical. He describes this young man, dressed to the nines, as an indescribable specimen of anthropologic potency.
Dripping with sarcasm, I assume.
Completely. This guy, supposedly sipping champagne he didn't earn, was apparently too weak and helpless to carry some paper and envelopes 20 feet across a room.
He called him an American monkey or something.
Basically, yeah. Contrasting that inherited helplessness with earned competence, Conwell was all about that disciplined, proactive approach, the kind you actually need to have real influence.
Which links perfectly to goal setting and taking action, like Earl Nightingale talks about.
Exactly. Nightingale insists success isn't luck. It follows predictable patterns, action, habit, not accidents. He stresses setting one clear, defined goal. Let your imagination run wild with it.
But then
Act promptly, decisively. Once the path seems clear, you move.
that mix of imagination and action, it's crucial even in creative fields, isn't it? Julia Cameron talks about battling the inner critic.
She calls it the censor, that nasty voice inside that tells you everything you do is terrible, a joke.
We all know that voice.
Right. And Cameron says it's paralyzing. Influential creators, artists, writers, innovators, they don't somehow magically get rid of that voice.
No. What do?
They learn to live with the doubt. They build up enough internal strength, enough discipline to just do the work anyway. Move through the doubt, not wait for it to disappear.
And sometimes that resistance shows up as just being busy. Workaholism.
Yeah, she calls workaholism an addiction too. It blocks real creative energy. It's like jamming your own signal with self-induced static, as she puts it.
So whether it's Conwell's common sense, Nightingale's action, or Cameron's battle with the censor, the message seems consistent. Influence starts with mastering that internal world.
And acting locally, immediately, using the strengths and opportunities you already have. That's the foundation.
Okay, so if that internal clarity, that private victory, is the bedrock,
Yeah.
how do you actually translate that into influencing others? How do you structure it?
Right. Now we move to the external tools, the technical craft. And for that, you really have to go back to the ancient masters, starting with Aristotle in Greece.
The father of rhetoric, essentially. What was his main focus?
For Aristotle, rhetoric was fundamentally practical. It exists, he argued, for the sake of making judgments. Whenever people need persuading, like in a political debate about policy or in a courtroom trial, that's where rhetoric comes in.
And he broke down how persuasion works.
Into 3 key elements, yeah. You need logos, which is the logical argument itself. He focused on something called the enthymeme. You need pathos, which is about understanding and engaging the emotional state of your audience. And ethos, which is the perceived character and credibility of the speaker.
Okay, let's pause on enthymeme. It sounds technical. What is it, practically speaking?
Think of it like a stripped-down practical syllogism. A formal philosophical syllogism starts with universal truths, right? All men are mortal. Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal.
Got it.
An enthymeme starts with probabilities or things the audience likely already believes. So if I argue this person is likely guilty because they had a strong motive and witnesses saw them nearby, I'm relying on the audience accepting that motive and presence are strong indicators of guilt.
Ah, so it's reasoning with the audience, using their likely assumptions.
Exactly. It's audience-centered reasoning. It doesn't have to be philosophically airtight, just persuasive in that context.
Which highlights why understanding the audience's emotions, the pathos, is so crucial. Logic alone isn't enough.
Never enough in practical persuasion. But this focus on technique, on manipulating arguments and emotions, it immediately raised red flags, didn't it? Particularly for Plato.
Right, Plato's critique in the Gorgias dialogue is pretty brutal. He basically calls rhetoric a sham.
He draws a really sharp line. There are genuine arts, he says, like justice or medicine, that aim to actually improve the soul or the body. And then there are these spurious arts, these knacks like oratory or cookery, that just aim to flatter or provide superficial pleasure.
Cookery for the soul, that's harsh. So rhetoric is just making things taste good, even if they're bad for you.
That's the accusation. It's flattery. It doesn't aim at what's truly best, just at what's most immediately pleasing or persuasive to the ignorant. Power without wisdom, Socrates argues, is actually a bad thing.
But wait, how does that square with using rhetoric for good causes, like the activists we mentioned, if rhetoric itself is inherently just flattery?
That's the tension, right? Socrates would say that if you're using these techniques without a true understanding of justice, you're just manipulating people. Your ethos, your character, has to be grounded in wisdom and virtue. Otherwise, even if you're technically brilliant, the persuasion is morally empty.
So it's not just about sounding good, you have to be good. Or at least project that convincingly.
That seems to be the implication. Which leads us nicely into the Roman tradition with Cicero and Quintilian, who took this idea of a complete orator and set the bar incredibly high.
Almost impossibly high from what I remember. What did Cicero demand?
Oh, Cicero wanted a Renaissance person before the Renaissance. He said the perfect orator needs the precision of a logician, the deep ethical thinking of a philosopher, the detailed knowledge and memory of a legal expert.
Okay, already daunting.
And the voice control, the gestures, the stage presence of a great tragic actor.
Wow. So basically a genius polymath who's also a captivating performer.
Pretty much. And Quintilian echoed this, defining rhetoric's highest aim simply as the ability to speak well. But speaking well wasn't just about sounding pretty. It involved serious strategic thinking.
Tactical genius, you mean? How so?
Well, they developed and refined all sorts of techniques for managing the audience's psychology. Quintilian talks about using insinuation.
Insinuation, like being sneaky.
Sort of. It means approaching your main point indirectly, especially if the audience is maybe hostile or bored, or if your opponent has already poisoned the well. You don't hit them head on immediately. You gently lead them away, maybe talk about something else briefly before circling back to deliver your argument.
Smart. And Cicero was a master of setting things up structurally, right? Using anticipation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
His prosecution of errors is a classic example. He knew people would be surprised he was prosecuting, since he usually defended people.
So he addressed that potential objection up front.
Exactly. He spent a good chunk of time at the beginning anticipating their surprise, explaining why he had to take this case, framing it as a civic duty forced on him by how corrupt Verres was. He dealt with the audience's potential resistance before launching the main attack, made it much more powerful.
And they even saw value in going off topic sometimes. Digressions.
If done well, yes. A skillful digression could provide a brief mental break for the audience, maybe inject some emotion or a related story before you elegantly bring them back to the core argument. It's all about controlling the flow and maintaining engagement.
But through all this technique, the foundation remained character.
Always. Both Cicero and Quintilian hammered this home. You have to maintain the semblance of a man of worth. If the audience thinks you're dishonest, greedy, just out for yourself,
Then all the fancy techniques fall flat.
completely, which circles right back to Covey and that internal private victory. The credibility, the ethos, comes from that perceived integrity. It's what makes the logos and pathos actually land.
Okay, so we have this potent combination: internal character and integrity, plus the external craft of structuring persuasive arguments. Now let's see what happens when that combination is aimed at challenging really entrenched systems, at demanding fundamental change.
And we have some incredibly powerful examples here. Let's start with Sojourner Truth. Talk about facing headwinds. She embodied, as the account says, the two most hated elements of humanity at that time: being black and being a woman.
Just imagine standing up at that women's rights convention in 1853, facing a crowd, a mob really, that had paid admission just to heckle and disrupt.
25 cents a head, apparently, just to cause trouble, and yet she stood there, calm, dignified. That speaks volumes about that internal sovereignty we were just talking about.
Absolutely. And what was the substance of her demands? What did that powerful voice call for?
What's striking is how practical and economic her focus was. She understood the systemic roots of oppression. She calls for cooperation among poor black laborers to fight despairing poverty. But she went further. She demanded access to the skilled trades and professions that black men and women were deliberately shut out of.
She named specific jobs, right? It wasn't vague.
Very specific. She pointed out it was just as hard then to get a young black man into a printer's apprenticeship as it was years before, even with high demand for printers. She listed them off: printing trade unions, salesmen, pharmacists, bank clerks, places where capable black people were simply denied entry.
She saw economic power as crucial for real influence and equality.
Absolutely. Voting rights were essential, but so was breaking down those economic barriers.
Now, compare that very grounded economic focus with Elizabeth Cady Stanton and the Declaration of Sentiments. A different rhetorical approach, wouldn't you say?
Definitely. Stanton and her colleagues used the structure and language of America's founding document, the Declaration of Independence, to frame the oppression of women. It was a brilliant, almost legalistic move.
How did they do that?
They presented this stark, factual list of repeated injuries and usurpations by men against women, mirroring the list against King George III. The goal was to establish a case for absolute tyranny over women, using the very framework the nation was built on.
Give us some of those specific examples they listed. The details are what make it so powerful.
They are brutal when laid out like that. They indicted man for forcing women to obey laws they had no voice in making married women civilly dead legally, taking all rights to property, even wages she earned herself.
Wow.
And systematically denying her access to well-paying professions, specifically calling out theology, medicine, and law. It's a methodical documentation of second-class citizenship, taxed but not represented, earning but not owning.
Just devastating when presented that way. Okay, let's jump forward a bit. Mid-20th century, we see figures like Malcolm X and Booker T. Washington, both incredibly influential, but with very different strategies for black advancement.
Yeah, two fascinating contrasts in approach. Malcolm X, especially later in his life after his pilgrimage to Mecca, he underwent a really significant shift.
How did Mecca change him?
It opened his eyes to the possibility of genuine brotherhood across racial lines, which was a huge departure from his earlier Nation of Islam rhetoric. But when he came back to the U.S., his focus became intensely political and strategic.
Less focus on the white devil rhetoric and more on what?
On building raw political power. He saw the limitations of solely moral arguments. He started urging black Americans to vote as a unified bloc. 10 million votes, he argued, wielded together. That's power nobody in Washington could ignore.
Pure pragmatism, then, using the mechanics of the American system.
Completely unapologetic about it. He said even the most diehard racist politician would have to negotiate with a bloc that size. He pointed to other powerful lobbies, big oil, labor, farmers, and said the black community needed its own massive lobby like a Pentagon, demanding legislative action.
Political power first, because economic power might take too long.
That was his calculation, yeah. Political strength could change things almost overnight, whereas building economic strength from the ground up could take generations.
Now contrast that with Booker T. Washington speaking decades earlier. His famous Atlanta Compromise speech took a very different tack.
Hugely different. Washington appealed directly to the economic self-interest of the white South. His core message was that famous phrase, cast down your bucket where you are. Meaning, use the resource you already have. The 8 million black people in the South, whose loyalty and work ethic had already been proven, he argued. He essentially promised a reliable, strike-free labor force that would help rebuild the Southern economy, make the waste places blossom, run the factories.
In exchange for what? Economic opportunity, social acceptance.
Primarily economic opportunity and a degree of acceptance, yes. He offered partnership in industry, but famously conceded on social segregation with that line. In all things that are purely social, we can be as separate as the fingers, yet one as the hand in all things essential to mutual progress.
A difficult compromise, viewed historically.
Immensely controversial then and now, but it highlights the different paths. Malcolm X, uncompromising political self-assertion now. Washington, pragmatic economic interdependence and proving value first. Both aim for advancement, but through radically different strategies of influence.
And finally, in this section, we have Nelson Mandela. His vision seems to aim even higher, beyond group interests to universal harmony.
Mandela's voice, forged over decades of imprisonment, is just remarkable. He emerged, and his fight was explicitly not just against white domination. He stated clearly he fought against black domination, too.
A crucial distinction.
Absolutely. His unwavering ideal, the one he said he was prepared to die for, was for a democratic and free society in which all persons live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. That vision of complete unity, transcending race. It feels like the ultimate goal for an influential voice working for systemic change.
So we've seen the internal foundation, the external craft, and the application to huge social issues. In this final section, let's look at what it takes to sustain that influence, to translate it into effective long-term leadership. And surprisingly, maybe it's often not about being the most charismatic person in the room.
Right. Jim Collins' research in Good to Great provides a really important counter-narrative to the cult of the superstar CEO. Mm-hmm. His findings were pretty stark. The leaders who took companies from good to truly great were often, kind of unassuming.
Not flashy.
Not at all. He described them as seemingly ordinary people quietly producing extraordinary results. They didn't want the spotlight. They were trying to become icons. Their ambition was channeled into the company, not their own ego.
And he contrasted them with the more typical, loud, charismatic types.
Sharply. He points to figures like Stanley Galt at Rubbermaid, who apparently called himself a sincere tyrant, or Chainsaw Al Dunlap at Scott Paper, who was famous for, as Collins puts it, loudly beating on his own chest.
And those types weren't the ones who achieved sustained greatness.
Generally not, according to his research. The key difference wasn't charisma or even genius strategy. It was this paradoxical blend of intense personal humility combined with ferocious professional will, discipline, focus.
And a willingness to face the truth, however unpleasant.
That was critical. Collins argues that the first, most crucial step these leaders took wasn't devising a brilliant strategy. It was confronting the brutal facts of their reality. You simply cannot make consistently good decisions, he says, if you haven't first made an honest, diligent effort to understand the real situation you're in.
Like the Kroger example he uses.
Exactly. Kroger honestly assessed its competitive landscape, saw the threats, faced the uncomfortable truths, before making the huge strategic shifts that ultimately saved it. Strategy follows confronting reality, not the other way around.
That emphasis on integrity, on facing facts, it loops right back to Covey again, doesn't it? Especially his ideas about interdependence.
It fits perfectly. Covey argues that the highest level of maturity and effectiveness isn't independence, it's interdependence, recognizing that we can achieve far more together than we ever could alone.
But you need that foundation of independence first, that self-mastery we started with.
Absolutely. You can't build effective, trusting, interdependent relationships if you haven't first achieved that private victory of self-control, proactivity, and integrity. You need to be solid yourself before you can truly collaborate.
And the mindset for interdependence is what he calls win-win.
Yes. Constantly seeking mutual benefit, not I win, you lose, or even compromising where everyone loses a bit. It's about aiming for a third alternative, a creative solution that's better for both parties than what either side initially proposed.
Sounds great in theory, hard in practice.
Very. It requires letting go of that scarcity mentality, the idea that there's only so much pie to go around, so if you get more, I get less. Win-win assumes there's plenty for everyone, that success isn't a zero-sum game.
And implementing it demands a specific communication skill, something about listening.
A profound skill, empathic listening. And Covey's critique here is sharp. He says most people, when they listen, aren't actually trying to understand.
What are they doing?
They're listening with the intent to reply. They're busy formulating their counterargument, their comeback, their own story, while the other person is still talking.
Guilty as charged sometimes.
We all are. Empathic listening, Covey says, means genuinely trying to see the world through the other person's eyes, to understand their perspective, their feelings, before you try to make your own point.
And it's more than just repeating their words back.
Much more. That's just technique mimicking. True empathy involves reflecting the feeling behind the words, using your intuition, saying things like, "It sounds like you feel really frustrated about this," or "I sense a lot of disappointment here."
And that builds, what? Trust.
Exactly. It builds emotional trust, the emotional bank account, as he calls it. When people feel genuinely heard and understood, they become much more open. Open to influence, open to problem solving, open to finding that win-win.
Okay, so integrity, facing reality, seeking mutual benefit through empathy. These are key for leadership. What's the final piece? Maybe the ability to withstand setbacks, resilience.
That brings us to the Stoics, particularly Seneca. He provides that final pillar, emotional mastery, self-sovereignty, and even gratitude as a source of strength.
How does Stoicism connect to influence in leadership?
Seneca argues the ideal sage, the truly wise and therefore influential person, is fundamentally self-sufficient. Their happiness, their supreme good, comes from within, from their character and virtue, not from external circumstances or even relationships.
Happy even without friends. That sounds a bit extreme.
It's provocative, but the point is about the source of well-being. It's internal. This provides incredible resilience. He tells that famous story about the philosopher Stilbo.
Right, when his city was conquered.
Yes. City captured, burned, family lost, everything gone. The conquering general, Demetrius, asks Stilbo what he has lost.
And Stilbo's reply?
"I have all my goods with me."
Meaning his character, his virtue.
Exactly. His internal state, his rationality, his self-control. Those couldn't be taken by external forces, no matter how catastrophic. That kind of internal fortress is what allows a leader to confront those brutal facts Collins talks about without collapsing.
Wow, that's powerful. And Seneca also links virtue to, surprisingly, gratitude. Not just receiving it, but giving it.
Yes, he has this beautiful idea that gratitude benefits the giver perhaps even more than the receiver. The wages of a good deed, he says, is to have done it.
So you don't do good things expecting something back.
No, you do them because the act itself, the expression of virtue, is intrinsically rewarding. It contributes directly to your own well-being, your own happy condition of soul. It reinforces that proactive, virtuous character that forms the bedrock of trustworthy influence. Hashtag tag outro.
What a journey. Okay, let's try to synthesize this. We've gone from ancient rhetoric to modern business, from personal wealth to social revolution. It seems the influential voice, no matter the context or the goal, it really does have some common foundations.
It really does seem to boil down to a few core things, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It starts with that proactive character, that internal mastery.
Right. Then there's the clarity to see and seize opportunity right where you are, Conwell's acres of diamonds.
Plus the technical skill, the craft, to actually structure your arguments effectively, understanding logic and audience emotion, like Aristotle and Cicero taught.
And the courage, the sheer guts to apply that voice against injustice, to confront the status quo like Truth, Stanton, Malcolm X, Mandela.
And finally, the integrity and empathy needed for real leadership facing reality. Listening deeply, seeking mutual benefit, like Collins and Covey emphasize, and maybe that stoic resilience underneath it all.
It's a demanding combination. Internal work, external action, technical skill, moral courage.
It is. And it raises a fascinating tension, doesn't it? A kind of necessary conflict, maybe, that anyone seeking influence has to grapple with.
What tension do you mean?
Well, think about the fierce, relentless passion of a Malcolm X in his later years, driven by profound injustice, demanding immediate, uncompromising political action out there in the world.
Okay.
Now, place that alongside the Stoic ideal embodied by Stilbo. Absolute internal detachment, self-sufficiency. All my goods are with me. If my core well-being is entirely internal and untouchable,
Why fight so hard for external change? Is that the question?
kind of, how do you reconcile that burning need for external justice with the internal peace and self-sovereignty that seems equally necessary for sustained influence and resilience? How do you keep the fire for the fight without letting it consume your inner calm?
Which lesson is more fundamental for someone listening today? Is it the push for external proactivity, Conwell's duty to act, to use your resources? Or is it that internal sovereignty, Seneca's fortress of the self, ensuring nothing external can truly break you?
Or perhaps the real challenge is finding the dynamic balance between the two. How do you integrate the fight out there with the peace in here? That feels like the ongoing work.
That is definitely something to think about, how to manage that tension. For everyone listening, we strongly encourage you to dive into the actual writings of these incredible figures, Conwell, Covey, Aristotle, Truth, Mandela, Seneca, all of them. Find your own answers, your own balance. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.